Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to our general finance meeting of May 1st. I hope everybody is enjoying the first day of May, and also want to give a special shout out and appreciation, a huge nyawa to all of our first responders. We had a little bit of a schedule conflict this morning, which is why we're meeting this afternoon for finance, as we recognized and gave an appreciation breakfast to all of our responders and Six Nations Police, Fire, Ambulance, as well as even our road crew, Public Works. I know there's a lot of people who play a big role in making sure and maintaining the health and safety of all of our members. So please help us and join us today and every day, really, in thanking all of those and first responders who continue to keep us safe. So nyawa for that. I am going to open the general finance meeting first by identifying any media on the line. I'm not seeing any media on the line, so that'll move to my next item, which is any changes, additions, or deletions to the agenda. Michelle?
I have one in regards to the U17 hockey team that won OMHA. They have a request for they want to put forward to council.
Okay, sure. Thank you for that. Michelle, is there anything further? Okay, seeing or hearing nothing further, I'll look to a mover and seconder to adopt our general finance agenda of May the 1st. Moved by Michelle, seconded by Audrey. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. We do not have any delegations or presentations scheduled for finance, so that'll lead us into the adoption of the general finance minutes of April 17th. Looking to any questions, comments to the.
I'll move on in minutes.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Greg. Further questions or comments? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Next item. This is a multi-service agreement for in relation to housing. I believe we have Lillian on the line, as well as it looks like it's a housing and social services. So maybe I'll look to those speaking to this item. Perhaps maybe Lillian can start, just to give a high-level background to the recommendation on our agendas.
Okay, so this is for the access road funding that we received from the Economic Development Trust for the extension of the development on Harold Road. So the first crossroad, after you get behind the daycare, where we're building our 5-unit with Habitat, and also where Social's building its 12-plex right now, doesn't currently have hydro. That was part of the development of that access road. We've just received the multi-service agreement, so we're just asking for approval for council to sign off on that agreement so we can get the vault installed, so we can provide power to that road.
Thank you, Niall and Leanne, for that. Opening the floor for further questions, comments, first beginning with Michelle.
I'll move.
Okay, it's moved by Michelle, seconded by Melba with a question. Back to you. Oh, sorry, Melba, did you have a question or just seconding?
I can, yeah. The 5-unit, how is that going to be managed for the community? Are they going to put in a request, or how is that going to happen? Because I'm still thinking about the homeless that are around in the hotels and wonder how they're going to get out of being homeless. Thank you.
So that is an additional 5 units that's being added to housing's portfolio, and it'll follow the same criteria as all our rentals. It's basically to get more units for the people that are currently on the wait list. It doesn't cover emergency housing. I know that's been discussed plenty of times at this table, but as of right now, we don't have an emergency housing program. I know Darren had spoken in the past about having the emergency control group, I think it was. Talk about that and discuss a policy surrounding that. But as of right now, these are just your standard units that will be added to our portfolio for rentals.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. And I think, Melba, that's even further to our other plans as well, where we can further discuss, because I know, as Lillian has mentioned, we've talked about emergency housing around this table for quite some time. And so now it's really at a point of further actionizing, really, in a sense. I know there's obviously different initiatives happening through our health program, as well as obviously social. So I'm sure with our collaboration at the forefront, we can definitely come up with a plan of action. Okay, is there any further questions or comments to the resolution? Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing any, so I'll go to the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Motion to waive second reading. Moved by Michelle. Seconder.
Second, Melba.
Seconded by Melba to waive second reading on the previous motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Okay, now for that, Lillian. The next item on our agenda is in relation to health services, Jordan's principal funding. You'll see the recommendation on our agendas. If I can look to, I don't know if it's Jesse. Hi, Jesse. Good afternoon. I'll maybe just pass the floor over to yourself just to give a high-level overview to the resolution.
Yes, so we are looking for a resolution for a funding application for this fiscal year under Jordan's principal for the Child and Youth Health Team. We're requesting $8,791,296, and I noticed that number is not present. There is the service delivery of $5 million is there, but we are also asking for those additional service coordination dollars, $6 million of which will be specifically for applications through Jordan's principal. Of that $6,250,000 being for emergency funding.
Okay, so sorry, Jess, just to clarify, because on our agendas, I'm not sure, because again, you've referenced the $5 million for the submission, but does that change the total?
It does change the total. The $5,437,000 that is outlined on the agenda is for the service delivery. So it's a two-part application. It is both service delivery through health services as well as service coordination. The service coordination piece is the application dollars that are provided to the community for Jordan's principal applications that are approved through Indigenous Services Canada. And so it is $5 million for the service delivery, that's correct. But it's missing the first paragraph, which is the service coordination application dollars, which is, I forwarded on to Becky too, so she kind of has those two blurbs. But it's $8,791,296 for the service coordination, which is really around the payment of equipment, services, and resources. And the $5,437,369 is for the service delivery. So the allied health professionals.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure that we're clear on the resolution and what we're passing. I do just really quickly also, after that clarification point, Becky, I want to ask that, and I'll open the floor up for further questions, as I'm sure there's a few hands I see being raised. But mine, just if I could just lead really fast. Jesse, I've been hearing, and I know obviously we've been having, as much as what Jordan's principal's dollars are meant for in assistance, I know we've been trying to really get a handle on Jordan's principal funding itself. I know even within the schools, very happy to hear that they finally come to an agreement and our students will be back in school. However, I've been hearing from different members like the importance of the tutoring, and I'm wondering if we can't wait for this obviously submission. So what can be done in the now, because now that we've had the kids out of school for COVID, we've had the kids impacted by the strike, you know, it's just constant that our students are the ones most impacted and have minimal support in a sense. So how can we come up with a plan of action so that we have additional supports for all of our kids moving forward, in addition to not only the tutoring, but homework support? Like, we have to go above and beyond at this point. And the other big part of this as well is the mental health aspect. You know, we've recognized mental health, you know, being an issue prior to the pandemic, and then further to what we're dealing with at our current moment, in addition to on top of, you know, post-pandemic. So there's a lot of, I guess, questions around Jordan's principle. I know we've been trying our best to make sure we're getting the services and the assistance out there. I just think we need to do better in the coordination and collaboration. So I guess if you can touch on those two pieces in the now of how we best support our students. For one, the tutoring and after support programs, and further the mental health aspect. So if maybe you can begin there with assistance of response, and then I'll open the floor further to other counselors who also have questions and comments.
Yeah, for sure. And as you all know, like, the program itself has grown substantially over the last few years. And you know, with the Haudenosaunee Tutoring Academy, that has been great. That's something in the past where a lot of tutoring has gone out to Sylvan. There's now like the opportunity to have tutoring on reserve for children and families, and that flows through our contribution agreement. But they provide those services in addition to like child and youth health. We continue to really advocate, and if you look in the request around service delivery, really looking at some additional positions around that mental health piece for our kids, because we've identified those gaps, and we continue to grow out the team to be able to meet some of those needs. But we are looking at, and we put it in the funding application, engaging with a consultant to really like look at the overarching services, and a local consultant, Amy Lickers, to really work with us to look at, you know, what are the existing services that we're providing, where the gaps still remain, and where can we really be working together. Because I agree, Mark, when we talk about it, there really is a need for collaboration across all the sectors in providing these supports. So we're kind of playing catch up. We've just had so much growth. It's really been substantial, and we really need to now sit and have somebody support us to really look at the program and look at, you know, the flow of services and the flow of supports that are running through these dollars, and how we can best use them, and really what we need to be asking for, because we continue to grow in what we have requested through Indigenous Services Canada. We continue to advocate in terms of like the timelines that some of these applications are getting back, and what we can do on our end, hence the emergency funds, which, you know, those are only the last couple of years, and we've been able to say there are times in which we cannot wait for approvals, but we know that there's more we can do. So that's where we're really looking at, like, having somebody engage with us and really support us in helping to figure out what that is.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just hope it doesn't take too much time. I mean, don't get me wrong, I obviously understand the time it takes necessarily or to plan out properly and so forth. But I guess to answer really quickly, Jesse, so the after school program or the tutoring, I was advised that funding had ran out. Is that true?
Well, yeah, they did another, like, I think some of our own internal processes too, because they have to have resolution similar to I have to put this resolution forward, and maybe there's some advocacy with ISC around some of these group applications, because they have to have resolutions in order for us to put them forward, and we know that sometimes, like, we would have to have a meeting like this, right, in order to get those resolutions.
Yeah. So I just sorry, Jesse, just really quickly.
Okay.
So then that's like, for me, it's to me like that's super important. So like if that's something that needs to be done, if it's an internal or something, regardless of which, I think we just got to get the program back up and running. So I'm not sure if you could start to work on that and whatever you need internally, because again, I just want to make sure that obviously all of our council and leadership wants to make sure our students are getting the necessary support. So if we could get that going, that would be great.
No, for sure. And I think like this year we've had a record year in terms of like application dollars. You know, we looked is more than 6 million, which is more than was provided like in for the fiscal year. And so it's really on our part to advocate to ensure that when things like that come up, that there is some room, right? So
Great.
yeah, no, for sure. I can definitely work on that in my end.
And to be honest, that's exactly why we're here as well. Politically, if there's things in terms of process wise, like you say, that may also be held up. I mean, a lot of the times it's the red tape, I think,
Yeah.
within own government processes and procedures that we could definitely advocate in terms of starting to eliminate them, because we've been in conversations with government as well when it comes to reporting requirements and all those pieces. Because at the end of the day, it's like half the time our staff are doing more reporting than they are actually getting the program, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Okay, now for that, I'm going to go to first. I see a number of hands being raised. I'm going to start with Greg, over to Audrey, Michelle, and Hazel. So Greg, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse, for the presentation. I just had a couple of questions that these numbers that you provided these are what we're applying for. Well, one question is that pretty much a guarantee that we will get these amounts? And my second question revolves around what the chief was bringing up about the emergency dollars. Now, do they come quicker and when you do the application? And that the 250,000 seems kind of low for emergency dollars. I don't know if that number can be adjusted. And then, but those are my basic questions on all the numbers that you were provided. Thanks.
Okay. It's not necessarily, I guess, it's not necessarily a guarantee. However, we ensured that when we put in the application, all the evidence is there to support what the dollar request is. The assumption is always, what we got that fiscal year we will get, but we showed this year, we've far exceeded the application dollars that were provided to the community, and we've shown that. So they need to be able to provide that larger dollar amount to cover the applications. And we've also shown growth over the last few years. So you see growth year over year. We can expect that will increase. So I think that we have the evidence to support the ask, and I feel like it's strong evidence, and there's no reason for them to deny it. Sometimes they will take small things from our service delivery, like positions, or they sort of send those up to headquarters for like an additional review. But we'll generally hear back quite quickly in terms of it might be like a partial approval where they've approved the majority of the request, but there might be some things that they do sort of send up higher. Around the emergency funds, yeah, it is a lower amount. Like in terms, it's not lower. We started with $100,000, I guess, and then we've realized that we do need to have some more. Oftentimes, what we will do is we will still have applications go in, but families can't wait for these approvals. So that's where we do have these emergency funds. We will use the emergency fund so that families don't have to wait. But then once approved, it's sort of like a bit, it can be replenished, right, for the next family. So we've been kind of creative in how we do use those emergency funds. But that's part of the work too that we really want the consultant to do, is look at what should we, like, dollar amounts. We're going off of our history, right? But we need to look to the future too, and really have those answers. I hope that answered your questions.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, now after that, Greg and Jesse, over to you, Audrey.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you for your presentation, Jesse. I appreciate it, since Jordan's principle is near and dear to my heart, because I've been an educator for so long. First of all, I'll move this motion with a question, and my question is twofold. What is the training that's being done? Because in order to work with students and to have them improve, you have to keep data on them so that you know that there is improvement because of having Jordan's principle funding and workers work with the child. There's one. And the second one is, I know there's a problem with scheduling. like Isle Thomas has a high number of Jordan's principal workers there, and scheduling in all the schools has to be a real problem. So can you shed some light on those two areas for me, please?
I can shed some light. In terms of like the training, so if we're talking about like the tutoring academy, that was like a group application that isn't directly supported, like overseen by the team. So that is the tutoring academy sort of is working to do their own training for those workers. As far as the one-to-one workers that are in the schools, we do some like overarching support for families in terms of, submitting for payment and those types of things, but the families are the employers. We have been working with the schools in terms of really looking at, because I think that is a comment that's come from a number of schools in terms of looking at the number of support workers and what makes sense in each of the classrooms. So it's really working with the schools to have more of that like oversight, I guess. We don't have the capacity within the people that we have on the team to oversee all of the workers in the schools, and we don't. They're funded for the families, and then the families are the employers of those workers, but the schools are the ones that are also writing all of the support letters for those workers, so they can like really have a hand in helping families in determining what the needs are in all the various classrooms. So that's really where we're working with, is working with the schools to find a system that's going to work for everybody.
Okay, is all this data being recorded?
So we record the number of hours that are provided for each of the children, for sure, because the approvals do come through us, and so we get approved for a certain number of hours, and then we support processing the payments. So on our end, we do have that data. In terms of the outcomes, that would be at a school level or a family level, if the families have information on that, but the schools.
Okay, yeah, that's my concern is, are the students getting the highest quality of service that they deserve? And I think that that's something that has to be looked into. Maybe Amy will do that when she does her work with this group. So thank you very much. And has the motion been changed by Teresa? Mark?
No, so that's why I know you are looking to move the motion. So Becky, can you resend that out with the additional the additional clause that Jesse was speaking to?
I did. I just sent it a couple minutes ago. To revise agenda revised with the no motion.
Yes. So did you send that via email? So it should be on top of councilors' emails.
I just sent it through email.
Okay, Council. So
the email like 2 minutes ago.
Okay, thank you for that, Becky. Audrey, if I can just ask that you can hold off on your mover or motion, just so that we can get council up to date with the latest resolution, if that's okay. So council, if I can ask you to check the top of your emails, that will read the new motion with the addition that Jesse explained earlier on. Just while we're doing that, I'm going to continue going down the speakers list, and now Audrey for that. Over to you, Michelle.
Okay. So I reached out to the tutoring academy to see what was needed after our last finance meeting, and they indicated that they've actually had like some good news that they believe their May to June 431,000 coverage will be covered by ISK. So that's good that hopefully now that they go back in tomorrow, they'll be able to restart that very soon. So just wanted to update because I think we were in limbo at that time. Even through the strike, there was some liaising with them. So hopefully positive news to come for that. So my concern is I actually think the request is quite low because we're focused on education. I think, what about water, right? I would, I don't know, I say dream big, and if we can help all our families with children, which is pretty well everybody, why is our request minimal?
Yeah, that's a good point around water connection. And we have in the past used like unspent funds for water connection. But I think that, yeah, like exploring, because that doesn't hook everybody up, right? Like there's still a lot more that is needed. I think just thinking in terms of, we were just trying to shoot big in terms of operations and applications, right? Just kind of from where we were at. But I agree, we do need to think bigger. And I think that that's some of the work that we need help with, right? But that's a good point around water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Michelle, oh, sorry, Michelle?
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I was gonna agree with Michelle. I think we have to start to incorporate, but I'm wondering in a sense of to Jesse, to your earlier point with the potential help and assistance of consult pieces around the bigger picture item and the bigger thinking. Like I understand the service operation side and what you're speaking of, but I definitely hear everything we can to the application process. So I'm wondering if maybe that's some of the work that is going to be happening with Amy. Is that part of it, Jesse?
Yep, that's part of it for sure. And I'm making notes fast and furious as well, Mark, as you guys are talking. But yeah, that is part of it. Is not just sort of just to think about the service delivery piece, but like overarching, what do we need? What can we ask of, right? Like, I think that that's a big piece of it.
Okay, now for that, Jesse, back over to you, Michelle, if you have any follow-up.
I lost my train of thought, but no, I really do think
Sorry.
there is no worries. I think there's just so much, and it's nice to hear that Amy is looking at those collaborations, but I really hear what Audrey is saying. I think we really need to not so much evaluate, because I think sometimes that word isn't liked, but track what's happening. Because I think if we're, we have 150 students every night going to tutoring, that's like unreal. So I want to be able, and anecdotally, I've heard, great things about the students getting to their reading level. But where do we see that on paper? Because I'm so tired of, our community is deficit based, and I don't think we are. We have so many strong people in our community. And so I want to be able to change that narrative. And by doing these programs, we need to be documenting that as we go. So thank you.
Really good points. Agreed. Yes. I'm going to continue going down the speakers list at this point, and then we'll go back to, I know Audrey's prepared to look to the motion, and you'll see that on the top of your email. So I hope you all had time to review. Over to you, Hazel.
Yes, thanks, Jesse, for the information you're providing. And I just want to have something clarified, because I sit on another board as a council rep, and the discussion occurred with regard to Jordan's principle and funding. And here's my understanding from discussions that we've had in council. I understand that Jordan's principal funding is not provided. Say, for instance, if a business wants to acquire some of the Jordan's principal funding to provide salaries for staff. And during this board meeting, I made the comment that no, they don't provide funding for a business to up their salaries for staff. And one of the people within that board said that's not true. They do. And I asked her if she could explain where she was coming from with that. And she said that they had received funding from Jordan's principal for a school to acquire a safety fence. I said, well, if you think about that, that's really providing safety for children. So yes, I could see Jordan's principal providing that funding. But I guess what I'm looking for is, I didn't think I was wrong with the statement that I made, but she told me I wasn't. It was not right. So can you help me clarify that, please?
Yep. There is an opportunity for example, for group applications. If there is if staffing is required to support children and youth, support like either the health or social determinants of health for children and youth, that could be included in a group application,
Yes.
similar to the group application we're putting forward. A fence for like a, to support a school fence, those types of things. Definitely those could be also supported. I think the key is it supporting children and youth, right? So not any business can just apply for Jordan's Principle dollars. It's really like what are the supports that are required, and does it make sense to be able to provide those through a group application for that particular organization, for example? Is that helpful? Like really, it's like you can have salaries for example, the child and youth health service delivery. That includes salaries in the application request. So for physiotherapist, social worker, occupational therapist, speech language pathologist, all geared to children and youth.
Not quite. Mark, I need you to help me here. Am I able to use a comparison of a private owned? Are they eligible to obtain funding to increase the salary of staff?
I think, sorry, I know where you're going here, Hazel, but I'm Jesse, I'm not sure, and this is where maybe you could further assist, but I don't think it reads on private businesses. Like say your example is on a group of if the impacts are directly with the student or child. It's different because, say, for example, we do have some businesses who are still doing those types of impacts, but I don't think it's within the criteria or the current criteria of Jordan's Principle for private businesses. And you can correct me if I'm wrong.
So it might be that a family does an individual application for their child to access that private business. And then the family is the one that gets the funding under an individual application, and then they pay for that service. So that in that way it can happen.
Yeah, okay, and I understand that way. So Hazel, I guess to answer your question, it would be no in that sense, unless we do further advocacy with that business, which I think we've already been trying.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
is there any, you're welcome. Is there any further questions or comments? And if not, I'm going to go back over to Audrey for a mover and seconder to the new motion, which you will see on your revised agenda. I see Kerry just raised his hand. I'll first go over to Kerry and then back to the motion, revised motion. Over to you, Kerry.
Yeah, so back to the water connections. So would the customers be able to apply for the funding for a water connection then, or is it just maybe, or is it going to be, are you going to apply for more money, or is it going to be on the money that's coming through this resolution?
It's not currently included in the dollars necessarily for the resolution. However, there are a number of application dollars. So there's 6 million of that is for applications. And if they were approved, then yes, it would get flowed through those dollars. We didn't include it as like a group application request. It is sort of, we have had approvals for water connection in the past, but we really have to make the case on how it's connected to health. And I think that this is where the opportunity is, like Michelle had mentioned, in terms of thinking big, right? And asking for those big asks. So I think we do need to go back and really look at like how can we make this case across the community and really push for those dollars as a larger ask in addition to this.
So to further that, then Kerry, that's where we'll see the work with the consultant so that we can do step 2 after this application, which will be what you're referring to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the mover. I know Audrey was willing to move the original motion. We have the revised motion on top of our emails. Looking to Audrey, are you still willing to move the
Yes,
revised
I'll move
motion?
that.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Yawa, for that. Audrey, is there a seconder?
I'll
Second
second it, Sherry Lynn.
call. Okay, now for that, Sherry Lynn, further questions or comments? And just really quickly, Jesse, if you could keep us, up to date on the latest with this, because, and your work with Amy, so that we can be maybe even potentially a part of, that focus group, or what that looks like in terms of input and feedback, because I think the next submission should be inclusive to all, and we should have a layout plan of what that submission looks like if successful.
Yes, definitely, Mark.
Okay, now for that. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions or comments or hands being raised, so I'm going to go to the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Motion to waive second reading.
I'll move, Sherry Lynn.
Moved by Sherry Lynn to waive second reading. Seconder.
I will.
Seconded by Audrey. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Okay, Jesse, again, Yawa, for all your work, and do look forward to that updated piece and where we can be further of assistance on any.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day. Okay, council, we're going to continue moving along here. You'll see within, I believe, your Dropbox, the Survivor Secretariat is hosting a second annual Survivors Gathering. There's a letter of request for support, which is attached. I believe that at this point they are looking for anything in terms of in-kind, as well as any financial contributions that we may be able to give. So I know this is finance, so I'll look to whoever would like to address or look to any financial contribution to the second annual Survivors Gathering. It's going to be hosted at the Gathering Place this year, as there'll be construction happening at the Mohawk Institute. Greg?
Yeah, I had a question, Chief. As you know, they recently received approval, I believe, for operating expenses in the neighborhood of $10 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
So do they have access to those funds at this time?
So they did have some issues in terms of the accessing of it a couple months ago. That's now been rectified. The only part is this is on so that's to the operations, the search, all of those other pieces. This is kind of something that they've done amongst on their own. So that's why they're looking for contributions to help assist any really offset any cost. And I know Tammy meets as well with Laura in terms of check-ins, just so that we're up to date. So I want to just maybe quickly pause and see if Tammy has anything to further add to this topic that might help offset your questions, Greg.
Okay, so I haven't anything additional to add, but I will during my next check-in with her, just do some follow-up on that. It is true that they have had some difficulty with accessing all of their funding, and we've allowed them because they want to stay apolitical. And so unless they request support from council on accessing their funds, we won't provide that support. But with regard exactly what Mark said, this is an initiative that they've wanted to do, and it's not something that's covered under the approved funding. So that's why they're looking for additional support.
And just to further for that, Tammy, just to further add Greg as well, because there's kind of three things happening, right? We still have the search happening, which is obviously led and overseen by the Secretariat itself. When the operation costs, that's where that original $10 million and all those pieces. Then they have obviously the gathering to try to bring us, because as they're doing this work and research further, it's only coming to the fact that there are more and more communities involved that have had kids attend, or rather students attend the Mohawk Institute. And so that's part of this work of bringing those together, bringing those survivors together to further on those pieces. And then the third other item is the Memorial Village Park, which is also part of that, which is not a part of the funds over here. So it's a little complex when it comes to, I guess, the format and the structure of the funding itself. But I think, you know, where we can also look at, and this is something we've been wanting to, and I think I brought it up last political liaison of our updates of where we could further support on the work that needs to happen at the Memorial Village Park, so that we could see that through and help along those ways as well. So I think at this point in time, anything really helps. I know they're very appreciative of council support already politically and what's been done thus far, but to further this this year's gathering, they are looking for whatever financial contribution we're able to give. So that's why I wanted to also maybe check in with Wayne or someone in our finance, Jennifer, so that we can see what we are able to even contribute if we're able. So back over to you, Greg, and then Sherry Lynn and Michelle.
Well, that was just my point, Chief, is where we could access, well, first of all, if we are going to give them a donation, second of all, the amount. And I guess third is where it would come from, whether it's COVID or OFNLP, or that would be, I guess, finance to determine that, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we'll look to Jennifer and Wayne to further assist us on the source of funds. And we'll look to the mover and seconder, if that's the case, of who and how much those funds would be.
Great.
So maybe just before I go to Sherry Lynn and Michelle, Jennifer or Wayne, are you able to assist in terms of, I know in the past, I don't know if we've actually ever, or I don't know if we did last year's gathering, because I'm not sure if we contributed to that event, but looking to see what we could and if where it would come from in terms of source of funds. Jennifer, Wayne?
Thanks, Chief. So right off the top, and thinking without having a known amount that they're looking for, there is the budget that was allocated to the CEO cost center. So there are those funds for this fiscal year, but again, without, and that's not a large amount, as you may or may not recall, but without any identifiable or known amounts, as like through the budget process, the OFNLP and OLG funds were identified for usage.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe what we can do then, Wayne, is can we do some due diligence and bring this item back? Because I know the gathering is happening towards the end of June. And so that we can make an informed decision on where and how much. So if it's 5,000, it could come from here or whatever that may be. But can we do some due diligence and bring this back to council?
Sure, we'll work with Tammy and come back to the next general finance meeting.
Perfect. That'd be great. Appreciate this.
Melba?
Okay, so we'll, sorry, I'll look to, I know Sherry Lynn and Michelle had their hands raised. Okay, questions probably been answered. Here, Melba?
Yeah, I think it's very important to support this because there's a lot of components to what is happening in the Secretariat. For example, the police are not involved. Now it's turned over to the coronary area. And I think the ground penetration, you know, that's kind of changing there too. So there's a lot of things, areas that are changing. And I think the community as well as council needs to be kept aware of how this is progressing for the graves that we're certainly looking for, and out of respect for the children who have been lost, as well as the community members who have lost people, not only from this community, but from other areas. So I would hope, and that's what I was going to suggest, at least 5,000. So hopefully we'll make that decision very shortly.
I totally agree with you, Melba. we'll bring this item back to council. I don't think it's a matter of decision of supporting. I think we're going to support it. It's a matter of due diligence and making sure we have source of funds identified and what that looks like. So we'll get our finance team to bring this item back.
Thanks.
Okay, I do appreciate your comments there, council. I'm going to continue moving along our agenda. So Wayne and Jennifer will look forward to that update at our next meeting. And again, we'll work with Tammy and Laura from the Secretariat to make sure that we see this contribution through. The next item then is the Ottawa Trust Fund. You'll see the recommendation. This is a pretty generic, I guess, process that we use. One majority obviously is for our upcoming bread and cheese. So you'll see the recommendation on the agenda. So is there any further questions, comments? And I believe Wayne can speak to this item. Yes.
There is one change to the numbers in the motion. The allocation for the bread and cheese portion should be reduced by $3,200, and the motion for the bell is increased by $3,200. The reason is that last year we didn't draw down the amount for the Economic Development Trust. So that was included in the total amount available right now. So we just got the numbers in, so I do apologize. And I was in the meeting this morning and Becky and I didn't have time to refine the amount. So so the numbers would be $72,322.47 and $6,400.
Okay, perfect. I see Becky also just sent it out and it's on top of email as well. That reads the correct number. So do appreciate that. Thanks for that, Wayne. Further questions or comments? Michelle?
No, I agree. Okay, sorry.
I can move that.
Oh,
So
sorry,
70
I wrote down this. Okay. Michelle, look at your top of email and you'll see the revised numbers.
yeah, I'll move it.
Okay, it's moved by Michelle. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it with a comment.
Okay, second, sorry, Sherilyn, I'll go over to Melba. Seconded by Melba with a comment, and I'll go over to Audrey and then Carrie. Melba?
Yeah, of course, community is certainly looking forward to being with other community members and receiving their bread and cheese. And I think it's hopefully realized that last year there was a bit of confusion, I'll say. And when you got there, Mark, I think you straightened things out. So I hope it's understood that there's volunteers that have been there like 20, 30 years. They know the process of how to give out bread and cheese. So hopefully it'll run very smooth for the people. And as for people going through again, I think it's important because it gets very confusing when you have people still going through the proper channels through from start to finish. And then you have people from the audience who are coming back. And if we can have some monitors sort of watching the people a little bit, or they're not interfering with people who have not gotten their bread and cheese. So if we could do that, that would be really great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Melba, for your comments as well as your suggestion. I think one of the bigger challenges as well that we had was the deliveries. You know, we wanted to try to get to as many of our seniors and you know, people who were unable to get to the actual event, and that caused a lot of frustration and confusion. So, you know, I think this year we've had a lot of challenges when it's come to bread and cheese, but one thing that I am proud of is we've never ever canceled it. Tradition within our community. We've had to modify it in multiple years, from delivering it to homes, as we all know, to drive-throughs, to you name it, we've done it. So we've definitely had the challenges, and definitely do appreciate all of the volunteers that come and assist, especially over the number of years. And so we will definitely make that happen this year. I think this is going to be the first year that we're actually back to a full-on normal bread and cheese as we're used to it. And so that I think is going to help eliminate a lot of the frustration and confusion as well. In addition, do agree with your comments as in terms of, monitors. We want to make sure, obviously, everybody gets their bread and cheese. As we all know, we're always first to run out of cheese. And so we, looking to the ordering of that as well, so that we can have, the fair share and everybody gets their bread and cheese. Sherry Lynn, over to Carrie. Sorry, Audrey, over to Carrie.
Okay, so with this
Thank you very much.
with this Ottawa Trust Fund, oh, not me?
Sorry, Sherry Lynn. I'll come right back to you. I did have Audrey in queue next. Sorry.
Okay.
Audrey, over to you.
Thank you. Mine is very short. I'm glad we've got bread and cheese back as usual, so very grateful for that. My question is, how are we safeguarding to make sure our cheese and bread are fresh?
Well, that's a good question. So one of our vendors who we've always dealt with in the past, our bakers, and I believe Shirley on the line? I'm not sure, but Beck can also talk to this. We've been working as much as we can, so that we don't, because we had issues with our bread in the last couple of years. I'm sure our community has taken note. And so one of those is to switch the vendor of our bread. However, one of the local majority of the people who we've reached out to in terms of companies aren't able to fulfill that big of an order during that time, is to my understanding. And so that's left us with the one company who continues to, in my view, disappoint us with our order. And so we are very much under the, I guess, timeline of finding a new company to offset our displeasure with the bread we've received over the past years. We haven't necessarily had issues with the cheese in terms of the safeguarding, Audrey, on that point, but it's to look to a new vendor for a baker, and that's the challenge we're up against right now.
And I think one of the things that the cheese could be cut more equal and not these great big slabs that we did last year.
Yeah. So those, again, that was based upon the deliveries, right? And that's where I think I spoke to the confusion, because we wanted to make sure that that amount was primarily for a household as opposed to an individual. So there's changes that you'll see. Sherry Lynn.
Yeah, mine was just around the Ottawa Trust Fund. Can you talk more about how this money is strictly just for bread and cheese? It's not we can't use the money for anything else? Yeah,
So I'm not sure, Wayne, if you can just highlight the pieces within the agreement itself of the trust fund, because there's two pieces to it, right? There's the economic development, and then there's the bread and cheese portion. So maybe Wayne can help us understand what that agreement states.
So thanks, Chief. Yes, the trust fund, there is a principal balance that has remained static for a number of decades, and I think it even predates my employment with Six Nations. And then there's the secondary piece is the interest earned on that principal amount, or that trust fund balance. Excuse me. So on an annual basis, so the 72,000 is the interest that is earned on the trust fund in the last year. Historically, since there are no specific funds identified for the bread and cheese events, the interest on the trust fund has been allocated to that event. The funds are at the discretion, or the interest is at the discretion of the council, so it can be utilized for whatever intended purposes that the chief and council deems appropriate. The other section of it was the permit monies that in this particular case are paid by Bell Canada for those junction boxes that are on various corners on the banned land. Those funds are set aside in the Economic Development Fund reserve for future use, largely for property purchases, land purchases. So hopefully that clarifies it.
Do
Yeah,
appreciate.
thank you.
Thanks for that, Wayne, and question, Sherry Lynn. Over to you, Carrie.
Just in a minute, it said that the bread was coming from Hagersville Bakery, so I guess it's not now?
Well, that's what I was just in contact with Shirley about this because we know we were going back and forth with we've had issues with the bread over the last couple of years. And so we were trying to come up with a new vendor who was able to take that on because of the ongoing issues that we received. And they are aware of them. Like, for example, there was one year, I think, where I think it might have been the first year we ever received whole wheat bread. So I think that the other piece was, there were some instances where there was found mold on the bread. And so we were just really displeased with the orders in the past. And we wanted to look at this point to a new vendor, which is what we're doing right now. So It still very much might come from Hagersville, but again, we don't know that as of yet. That was my latest conversation with Shirley. Okay, is there any further questions or comments? Again, do look forward to this annual event. I believe, sorry, Michelle, I just want to confirm, did I have a mover and seconder, Becky?
Yes, you did. You need a vote and then second reading.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, council, it's been moved and seconded. I am going to go to the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Motion to waive second reading. Moved by Michelle, seconder.
Second, Melba.
Seconded by Melba to waive second reading on the previous motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Council, the next item I think is going to be in the same realm of the Survivor Secretariat letter of request. So what I'm going to do is again ask Wayne and Jennifer to do a little bit more due diligence on what we can contribute and ask them to bring this back at our next meeting as well. So if that's okay with council, I'm going to defer the next item. Again, this for communities information. This is in relation to the NAG games of 2023, which is a sponsorship request. And so we're looking to look to the further due diligence on this piece as well. Michelle?
So, and I had asked at Art last week to put this on the agenda because I've had parents, now that teams have been selected, there is a $300 registration cost, and we know Six Nations will have a lot of athletes traveling. So I've even reached out to NAG to see if they can give us a number of how many athletes we have going to Halifax. So yeah, it is premature. The games will be in July, but I wanted to put this out there because I anticipate we're going to get inundated by individual requests. So if we can, as a council, do something on the whole, that's just make life easier.
That makes so much more sense. Do appreciate that. Thanks, Michelle. We'll look to also the donation. Obviously, we have the donation fund, but perhaps if that's something, if there's a number of athletes, and we'll look to that number when we do. I agree with you. I think it'd be best dollars spent in a more cohesive and collaborative manner. So we'll look to bring this item back, if that's okay, and get the status of the donation fund as well. Sorry, Michelle, just really quickly, contact-wise at NAG is that Marsha Trudeau, Bobbery?
I've been talking to Hannah.
Okay, I just want to make sure, just so that we can, if you can inform and assist us as well with the chief's office, so that we'll get that coordinated number, as you say, to the number of athletes from our community.
Will do.
Okay, now for that. Okay, council, I'm going to shift over now to new business. Back to you, Michelle.
So I think we all were aware because the Fire Chucks brought our Six Nations U15 team in that won the Ontario Championships. So I was the coach. He reached out to me last month to see if council would be willing to support either rings or jackets for the team. So the rings are $5,000 and the jackets are $2,500. So I wanted to bring this to full council, to community. And, you know, this is something that we want to support.
Okay, thanks, Michelle, for bringing this item forward. I know, again, it was huge congratulations to the U17 team. I know we also did I believe our comms team put out a nice statement and press release with their photo, which is obviously good, but we want to do more, especially to all of our teams who continue to, and the athletes who continue to make our community proud, especially our most recent, which everybody I'm sure seen on the game last night, Mr. Brandon Montour. We have a lot of athletes who are just really doing good things and really showcasing those, you know, the role model and inspirational pieces. So I'll look to full council for discussion on this. If that's something that maybe perhaps again that we leave with Wayne and Jennifer to see how and if and where it could come back from. And we'll get a more detailed report on that, Michelle, if that's okay with full council, so that we can look to the source of funds, what the status of the donation. I know we increased that. And so if we do decide, we'll look to if there's even options. So Wayne and Jennifer, I do apologize. I've tasked you with now 3 items of bringing items back so that we have further due diligence of source of funds and how much and where they're coming from and so forth. Okay, that does, if that's okay, I'm not getting any opposition with that. And thank you, Now and Michelle, for bringing this forward. So we'll continue to do that work and get back as quickly as possible with a decision so that you can forward on to the coach. Just really quickly, I believe that was the only new business item we have. However, there is, I think in our chat, as we are live, just quickly want to do a happy birthday shout out to Dixon Cedar. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. So happy birthday to you, Dixon. I know that was a request that we received. So do want to follow up with that. And as well as just before we close out again, as we started out, want to say a huge now to all of our responders, our Six Nations Police, emergency responders, Six Nations Police, Fire, and Ambulance. We hosted a breakfast for them this morning. It was really nice to see them come and enjoy a meal and converse and somewhat relax for that little short while. And again, all of their work does not go unnoticed, and we're so much appreciative of them for continuing to keep our community safe. So now to all of them. That does complete our general finance agenda of May the 1st. I hope everybody is having a good May 1. And at this point, we'll look to a mover and seconder for adjournment. Moved by Michelle, second by Greg. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Now to everyone for joining us, General Finance. I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Take care.